In a village located at the foot of a mountain, there was a legend that had never faded for centuries. This legend revolved around a ghost known as Kuntilanak. However, not many knew that this terrifying Kuntilanak had a dark and painful history, one that stemmed from a long-forgotten past. This story begins in the Kingdom era with a young woman named Ratri. Ratri was a beautiful woman from a noble family living happily with her husband, Wirawan, a brave and valiant soldier. They had just married and were living in a large house on the outskirts of the village. Their life seemed perfect, full of love and hope. However, their happiness did not last long. One day, the kingdom where they lived was struck by a great war. Wirawan, as a soldier, had to leave for the battlefield to defend the land. Ratri, though heavy-hearted, reluctantly let her husband go, with a promise to wait for his return. Every night, Ratri sat by the window of their house watching the empty road, waiting for her husband's safe return. Days passed, and the news of the war grew darker. Ratri began to feel anxious, but she continued to wait, hoping that her husband would return unharmed. However, months passed without any news. Rumors spread that Wirawan had died in battle, but Ratri refused to believe it. She was certain her husband was still alive and would return one day. One night, when the full moon shone brightly, Ratri, sitting by the window of her house, heard footsteps approaching the house along the narrow path. Her heart raced, and she ran outside to see who was coming. When she saw the figure of a brave soldier dressed in armor, Ratri ran toward him in excitement, calling out her husband's name. "Wirawan, you're finally home!" However, as the figure came closer, Ratri noticed something strange. The man looked pale, his eyes hollow, and his body seemed incomplete, like a corpse freshly buried. "Wirawan!" Ratri cried out, but the figure only smiled wickedly. Without a word, the figure grabbed Ratri's hand, and in an instant, she felt herself falling into an infinite darkness. At that moment, her body fell into an abyss, and her soul became trapped. The husband who had come to her was not Wirawan, but an evil spirit disguised as him, manipulating and deceiving Ratri. And due to her deep disappointment and confusion, that spirit cursed her to become something far more terrifying, a soulless creature known as Kuntilanak. Ratri, now transformed into Kuntilanak, lived in endless suffering. She was trapped in her own confusion, waiting for a husband who would never return. Her desire to reunite with him turned into a dark obsession. Ratri, now a Kuntilanak, with long hair covering her face, began to appear at night, wandering in search of a soul to take with her, someone to keep her company in her loneliness. Every night she cried, waiting for someone who could understand her torment, but no one ever came. Over time, the village where Ratri had lived was shaken by strange occurrences. The villagers often heard the sound of a woman crying at night, accompanied by the sound of footsteps floating in the air. They also frequently saw a figure of a woman in white floating among the trees. Many tried to drive the spirit away, but every attempt only provoked Kuntilanak's wrath, which devastated their village. Kuntilanak, once Ratri, no longer knew love or compassion. Only pain and vengeance remained inside her. Every time she appeared, she would seek out pregnant women or vulnerable children because she believed they symbolized the happiness that had been lost from her life. In her solitude and deep resentment, Kuntilanak sought to destroy the happiness of others because she could no longer feel it herself. On certain nights, Kuntilanak would sit atop a tree or a large rock, waiting for her next victim. As she approached, her crying would sound like an agonizing scream. If someone was deceived and approached her, they would find that the face of Kuntilanak, hidden by her long hair, was a horrifying visage, full of rage and deep sorrow. The village eventually became known as a place filled with terror. Many people tried to leave the village, but there were always those who could not escape Kuntilanak's grip. The people who remained believed that Kuntilanak was the manifestation of unrequited love, a woman filled with pain and loss. They believed that Ratri, now Kuntilanak, was eternally trapped in a curse, always waiting, always searching, never able to experience happiness. Even to this day, stories of Kuntilanak continue to spread, and many consider it a warning. A tale that reminds us of how powerful loss and suffering can be. Kuntilanak is not just an ordinary ghost. She is a figure consumed by an endless waiting. Every cry she makes is a call to those who still have hearts full of love, unaware that love can turn into something terrifying. This story delves into the origin of Kuntilanak, exploring her tragic transformation from a woman in love to a ghost consumed by sorrow and vengeance. The themes of love, loss, and a curse highlight her eternal suffering and the terror she brings to those who cross her path. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment so the admin stays motivated to share more ghost stories from Indonesia.